Shaman, it's me, Dr. Macclevoid. It's not my real name. Now, listen, normally on this channel we review television programs, movies. I don't know why I'm saying we. It's me, isn't it? You don't do it. So, this is a video with a little bit of a difference because we're not reviewing a film. We're reviewing a man. That man is Michael Jackson. Why? Well, there's a movie out, Michael. The biopic of Michael Jackson. It depicts Michael Jackson as the sort of saintly, godly, messianic megastar that he imagined himself to be, and in the minds of some pliable, impressionable people out there was. Now, I haven't seen Michael. I've no intention of seeing it. If I wanted to sanitize mythical version of Michael Jackson's life, I just listened to his music. Obviously, there is a controversy around the film. People have talked about it. They've said, well, the people who criticised the movie have missed the point. I mean, it's a movie for the fans. It's about celebrating his music and his legacy. It would be ridiculous to talk about the allegations against him of paedophilia, child molestation that came up in 1993 and lingered like a bad smell until his death. Why discuss that? It's kind of silly, isn't it? I mean, why not make a movie about O.J. Simpson's career as a great American footballer and his acting career? Why not stop it in 1993? We don't have to deal with the bad stuff that happened after that, do we? The double murder and the jail time and the infamy and the denials and the attempts to rehabilitate his reputation and all of that sort of. What's the point of that? Some wag on Twitter said, hey, you can make a movie about Hitler, which ended, in 1918 with him getting a medal for bravery in the First World War. What a feel-good story that would have been, It warmed the cockles, a story of heroism and bravery on the field of battle. Wonderful. Hitler, a soldier story. I'd go and see it, wouldn't you? I mean, there was stuff after that, yeah, but do you want to talk about that? And besides which, people have different views on it, don't they? So, look, Michael Jackson inspires a lot of love amongst his fan base. They're a dedicated lot. They're a happy breed. And they still believe in him even now. And that's why they're so upset that some people, some critics who have some ludicrous expectation that a biopic, like a biography, should in some way be a sort of interrogative, truthful, curious, psychologically dense account of a life, rather than, just a sort of greatest hits package with somebody cosplaying the actors' concerts and music videos. I don't know where you stand on that, and I don't really care. But look, Michael Jackson, let's face it, inspires that sort of devotion from his fan base. And like other big black figures in American popular culture, like OJ, for example, inspires a lot of devotion, particularly from the black communities, held up as a sort of a black icon. And it's ironic, you might think, because, of course, both OJ Simpson and Michael Jackson rejected their black heritage, didn't they? They rejected black culture. OJ Simpson famously lived amongst a rich white community, only to embrace his ethnic heritage when he needed it to make a trumped-up case that he'd been the victim of racial discrimination when on trial for double murder, when of course it had absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with his race. Michael Jackson hated his identity so much because he'd been abused by his father and criticised by his father, that he tried to disavow his own uh, blackness, and he didn't want to look like his dad, so he became a sort of transracial figure, changing his whole racial identity, bleaching his skin, getting plastic surgery, turning himself white, lying, as he tended to do, to the general public, and telling them that he had some sort of skin condition, which he didn't have. His condition was that he was addicted to plastic surgery. It's not really a medical condition, is it, per se? So he sort of gradually transformed himself into a white person, but also into a young person. You know, he got a bit younger and a bit weird and a bit more eccentric as he got older. Many people think this dates from the Thriller period, because that's when his fame became sort of infamy, when he went from being a star to being a kind of a megastar, the so-called king of pop. What an accolade that is. And from that point onwards, he became a very strange man indeed. You know, he was the first black celebrity probably in the history of the world to use his wealth and position and isolation from social norms to transition his race, and then pretend that he wasn't doing that when, you know, offence threatened to put a dent in the adulation that he depended on psychologically. He was the first man ever to recreate his childhood, his stolen childhood, his lost childhood, and live in it. You know, build a compound called Neverland, which he lived in with Ferris wheels and rides, so for child visitors. And that's the other aspect of him, of course, isn't it? That Michael Jackson was a paedophile, a psychosexual head case, but a different sort of paedophile, not your common or garden, off the shelf, you know, 3 for the price of 2 paedophile. Not that kind of paedophile, not the kind of paedophile that you get with a mail order catalogue. No, an unusual paedophile. Probably the most unique, strange kind of paedophile that's ever existed in the history of the world. It's not uncommon, of course, for people in positions of power and celebrity to exploit their status to prey, to predate, if you will, on children, on young people, on the vulnerable. That's a story as old as mass entertainment and celebrity. We've seen it with Gary Glitter, we've seen it with Jimmy Savile, and various others that we can't talk about for legal reasons. But Michael Jackson was different from them, I suggest, because whereas you know, Jimmy Savile is your old-fashioned home brand kind of paedophilia, the kind of just, you know, creepy, lecherous, filthy old bastard who takes advantage of the young and the sick in order to indulge in his perversions. There's the sense with Michael Jackson, it's only a sense because I don't know and you don't know, but I'm going to dare to say so anyway, that he was a man who was more interested in living as a child than predating on kids as a conscious, ordinary adult. In other words, I think that following his stolen childhood, what he tried to do was he tried to rebuild his adolescence, using his wealth and power to sort of live in a hermetically sealed, de-aging bubble, if you will. You know, think of all the things that you do in adolescence. It's about learning who you are, building your identity, exploring your sexuality. All of those things Michael Jackson did, but as an adult, not as a child. You know, he got himself the adolescent friends, the child friends that he didn't have as a child, because when he was a real child, he was out touring and dancing and with the Jackson 5 and working relentlessly to become, you know, the pop star that he became. He didn't have a proper child. He wasn't out on his bike or down the arcade with his mates. He didn't have any friends. So when he became an adult, he wanted those childhood friends, except they had to be real children, because that was his attempt at beginning to have an adolescence of his own, a child of his own. He wanted to be the guy that stayed at home and played video games and rode the carousel and all the rest of it. All the things that he wasn't allowed to do as a kid because he was far too busy entertaining the likes of you. Yeah, you're sort of to blame in a way. Shouldn't have bought his records. So he wanted to explore his adolescence, but with real children. He wanted to explore his burgeoning, stunted, oppressed sexuality as an adult, but sort of in an adolescent way, and that meant doing it with, other adolescents. And if it were just that, if he was just, enacting his Peter Pan fantasy, perhaps it would be no more wrong or dirty than your teenage fumble with Becky Edwards. But there's a problem here, isn't there? Because this wasn't just a man-child, with deferred growth, deferred development. This is a man-child who is a multi-millionaire with his own compound and own security force. And that means, of course, he has power. And power is fundamentally linked to exploitation, because the people that he's bringing into the compound are not rich and not famous, except Macaulay Culkin, who he didn't touch because he was rich, because he was famous, because he had a public profile, and he'd tell everybody, and he'd be believed, wouldn't he? Because he's Macaulay Culkin, and we all love Macaulay Culkin. So I believe Macaulay Culkin when he says nothing happened when I was there. Michael Jackson might have been a bit deranged, but he wasn't stupid. He understood, like all paedophiles, that you prey on the vulnerable, the people who won't be believed, the people who have no voice, the people who don't have multi-million-dollar lawyers that can sue you into the next world and expose you for who you are, expose your perversions to the world. He understood that. And he had the money, of course, to pay off the likes of Jordan Chandler. Gave him somewhere reputedly between $15 and $20 million. This is in 1993. In order to shut him up, because he didn't want him, testifying in court. He certainly didn't want the people who investigated the case to put their evidence on the record either, because then, even in America, where he was loved, and and in the rest of the world where he was loved as some sort of ridiculous, false idol, demigod-like figure, he would have been finished, because we can forgive a lot, can't we? We like to bop to, bad and can't stop till you get enough, and indeed, he didn't stop until he'd had enough. But we draw the line, don't we, at the idea of a creepy man-child fondling our kids. We don't like that. So how have the fandom dealt with it? By ignoring this fact, by forgetting it, by pretending it's a fit-up, by pretending it's an attempt just to sully the name of their hero. Why anyone would do that when he was just a pop singer and they haven't done it with anybody else, your guess is as good as mine. But I guess they must have had it in for Jacko Watt because he wasn't black. Maybe they just thought he was a tit who, because of his arrested development, looked like a bloody fool when the world's most effeminate man told us he was bad. Implied that he hung around in gangs and graffitied underground car parks. The kind of silly thing, the kind of equivalent of a normal person getting a nose earring and a leather jacket and going around saying, "What's up, man? I'm bad." Which I've apologised for. So, Michael Jackson was a man who, because of his status, because of his fortune, could sort of indulge his perversions and his fantasies, and act out a sort of Freudian nightmare. How could he do this? Well, he did it because you empowered him. You bought, off the wall, didn't you? You bought thriller. You bought bad. You bought dangerous. Um, you didn't buy history really, and you certainly didn't buy Invincible, but you bought those first albums, and because you did, you gave him power and status, and the means to do what he would, and the means to cover it up, and the means now for his company, his production company, his estate, to have written in conjunction with his lawyers NDAs that prevent the producers of the film Michael from even mentioning these allegations. They're not. Forget, you won't see John Chandler portrayed in the film because he legally can't be, and you won't hear even a hint of these allegations because Michael Jackson's estate and Michael Jackson, when he was alive, have worked so bloody hard to ensure that they can't be dramatised. But it doesn't stop other people talking about them, does it? For example, the producers of Michael Jackson and American Tragedy, the documentary that's now on BBC iPlayer, which I encourage you to watch. So that, my friends, is why the Michael Jackson movie Michael in cinemas on Friday is being called a whitewash and a travesty and propaganda and nonsense, because it's a biography without truth. It tells some of the truth. It tells the public truth. It portrays the image, not the man. Surely the point of any biography and any biopic is to learn about the man or woman, isn't it? Isn't that why we go to see these movies? Jukebox musicals are fine, but don't you really, if you want to, if you're interested in the individual, want to know who they really were? What's the point of going to see a film like Michael if you can't find out anything interesting about him? It's great to see Jafar Jackson, his nephew, doing a great impression of him, but what's the point of it? The real Michael Jackson is available to anybody who wants to listen to it. It's available by buying his recordings or watching his videos, or God, if you're really into Michael Jackson and you're desperate, you could watch Moonwalker. Although I wouldn't recommend doing that. So that's why Michael is controversial, because it's a lie. And it's more of a lie than most biographies. Of course, all movies based on real people play fast and loose with the truth to some extent. There are elisions and omissions and embellishments and omissions and so on, always. But in Michael Jackson's case, to end the story in 1993, well, it's a bit like playing half a record, isn't it? And the meaty stuff's in the second half. Till next time, I'm Dr. Macclevoid. It's not my real name. I know, word to your mother.